This is Jason Bliss with Cadence Technology, and in this video we're going to take a look at ABC XYZ Analysis as part of APO Demand Planning. I'm going to start out with a few of the high-level concepts, and then we'll actually branch over into a demo environment and see it in practice. Okay, to start out, ABC XYZ Analysis is really just a grouping methodology for sales history. The goal here is to look at sales history at a very low granular level, from the lowest level planning objects, and then group it in terms of two factors. One would be the importance or the value, and that's the ABC analysis. And the goal in this portion is to group the most important items that require generally the most oversight from planners. XYZ analysis, on the other hand, looks at the volatility of the historical demand. So it's going to group items that have very constant, steady demand together versus ones that are very random, sporadic, have some type of seasonal or trending patterns, and then group those together. And then when you combine those two classifications, you end up with the grid that you can see on this slide. There's 9 possible combinations, and the goal of this feature in APO is to assign each CVC to one of the 9 classification groups. You can see in the example here, we've got one that's very high volume. This would be maybe a big revenue driver. So an important item, but it's also one that has pretty constant, steady demand. So you might expect something like this to show up in the AX quadrant. And this kind of just gives you a little bit of insight as to how this could start to help planners by taking some of the heavy lifting out of classifying the materials and grouping them together. So, planners can now start to look at the results of these groupings and start to manage by exception. It could group items that do require a little bit more hand-holding or manual intervention together so that the planners can focus on those. So let's take a look at this in the system and see how it works. So I'm going to launch my demo box. This is an SCM on HANA system, and I have my ABC, XYZ, T codes saved in the favorites. The first one is the classification and forecast optimization. So I'll talk about the forecast optimization in a minute, but this is actually where the classification that we just talked about actually occurs. As you can see, you can restrict this down to a certain planning version. You can restrict it based off selection profiles, so you can choose the CVCs that it runs on. You can also restrict the horizons. So in this example, for ABC analysis or the importance ranking, maybe I only want to look at the last 6 months. I only want to grab materials that have a lot of revenue generation in the last 6 months. For the XYZ analysis, though, since I'm looking at historical trends and patterns, maybe I want to run this on a wider range, so I've got it set for 2 years in this example. Okay, and then the forecast optimization feature that I briefly mentioned, what this does is, based off the classifications as a result of all the groupings, the system will suggest which forecast profile would be the best fit for that historical grouping. So in other words, if the classification ends up saying that a material has some seasonality, it may suggest using a seasonal forecasting model. Likewise, if it had a trend or some other pattern that it perceived, it might use a trending forecasting model. So we'll leave this selected and run it with this so we can see how it actually influences the results. Okay, and like I said, when this is running, it's running on every CVC. In my selection profile, I've got around 30, so pretty limited data set, but it's going to start with each CVC and group them based off ABC, XYZ classifications. Okay, here's the log. You can see all 31 were grouped based off XYZ, or the volatility. They were all grouped based off of the volume or value in the ABC groups, and then it actually optimized and recommended forecast models for all 31 as well. Okay, to view those results though, we'll now go back in another session and we'll launch this second transaction, which is the classification results report. So this is going to launch a web browser where we have the report. I'll pull in the same material that I just, or same selections that I just ran. Execute the report. And the first thing you see here is I have a chart and a bar graph that shows the counts and the breakdown of the classifications. So you can see all 31 CVCs and how it breaks down. So in my A banding, or my most important group, I have 7 CVCs. 5 of those fell into the AX, or the pretty steady constant groups. I do have one that fell into AZ, so maybe you could interpret this, our planner could see this as an important item that's very sporadic or volatile. So we may want to flag this one that fell into the AZ group for further review. If you scroll down, you can see the details. You can see CVC line by line, what it was actually grouped as in terms of ABC and XYZ groupings, as well as the forecast profile that it suggested. If we want to adopt these forecast profiles, we leave these checked. And we could also uncheck these if we don't want to go forward with the forecast optimization. And like I said, maybe we want to take a special look at something like an AZ classification. So I can filter this down. Here's the one CVC that it identified. And we can see that it actually recommends a seasonal forecast approach. So we'll leave this. If we wanted to change it or disable it, we could, but we'll leave this. We'll save the results, and we'll go forward to the interactive planning and see how everything integrates. Okay, I'll launch interactive planning. First thing to note is that we have selection profiles maintained for all of the different ABC, XYZ classification groups. So these are dynamic. As soon as classification runs, the CVCs are then can be displayed in these groupings. So for example, the AZ one that we just saw that had one combination, if I open that, I see the same thing here. We'll go ahead and run this. Like I said as well, it'll pull forward the suggested forecast profile, which in this case was seasonal. You do see the univariate reflecting seasonal here, and we can look at the graph and see where it picked that up from. So we do see, if we look back at the history, we do see it's fairly high volume going back 2 years. Also has a ton of volatility. There is some seasonality that it looks like it has. And again, just by looking at the history, it separated this out, would have grabbed the attention of a planner, and then suggested a best fit seasonal forecasting model based off the history. So with that being said, this concludes the demo. You can see the forecast gets carried through. So I will pull up contact information. If you have any questions about this or any other APO questions, feel free to visit the website or send an email. Thanks for watching.